I have finally decided to send you my encounter. I've never told this publicly, but I have told it to 3 people, the closest people in my life. My encounter took place in 2011. It was at my buddy Marcus's family's cabin. I asked him before I did this, and he doesn't even want me to give the state in which it's located in. I'm sorry, but I can't give that information if he is against it. I'll give you as much as I can, hopefully. It'll be enough. Before I tell you what happened, and all the details, first I need to tell you that I had never been hunting in my life up until this point. Marcus was a big-time hunter. He had asked me for years to let him take me out hunting, and I always refused. And the one time that I agreed was the one time that nearly costed me my sanity and possibly my life. The idea seemed simple enough. When I got the invite, me and Marcus had been talking about going up there, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. It just wasn't my cup of tea, but to appease my friend, I thought, why not? It's just one time. How bad could it be? That's a question you don't ever want to ask, because usually it can be really bad, even worse than you can imagine. He said it would just be us 2 guys. We'd drink some beer and get away from the yapping of the wives. True isolation. No phones, no distractions. Just us and the quiet of the woods. It sounded all well and good, so I finally agreed. I'm not the biggest fan of being out in the middle of nowhere. Call it a mild case of claustrophobia, maybe. But he kept insisting it would be a good time. I remember him telling me over and over that it's not that remote. Well, guess what? Marcus lied. It was about 4 miles from the nearest road, with a tiny gravel path leading up through some of the thickest woods I've ever been in my life. The minute I stepped out of the truck, I was instantly slapped with this uncomfortable feeling like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like there was some sort of immediate risk or danger or threat to my well-being. But it wasn't until it got dark that I understood why I felt that way. We had spent that day wandering around hunting. Not that I even had a clue what we were doing. I just followed his lead and his instructions. We didn't have any luck and dragged ourselves back. I just drank some beers by the fire, burning time until we could just go inside and go to sleep. By the time we got back into the cabin, that nagging feeling in my gut was just overtaking me. My brain just kept screaming at me that I was not supposed to be there, and that I needed to leave right now. I just thought I was freaking myself out because I wasn't used to being in a place like that. Anyway, the cabin was not that small, but it was also pretty nice. Someone had spent a lot of money updating that place. It was a very rustic place, but very well done and very well built. It had a wood-burning stove in the corner, and it even had a kitchen that looked like it was nicer than the one I had in my house. At one point, he finally noticed I was acting a little jumpy. I was going from window to window, looking outside, pacing around the cabin like I was lost. Which in my mind, I totally was. He finally asked me if I was all right. I just told him that everything felt off because it was just too quiet, I guess. He laughed at me and said, "It's just the woods, man. You're not used to it. You'll be fine." I wasn't so sure that I believed that, but I let it slide. We had a couple more beers, filled the stove with wood, and eventually called it a night. Marcus passed out on the couch, so I went to one of the 2 beds. The bed was directly by a window that was facing out the back of the cabin straight into the woods. It took me about an hour to finally fall asleep. I had never experienced that type of silence before. It was so quiet that my ears were muffled. My hearing was muffled and my ears were ringing. It was very strange. Now I understand when people say the silence is too loud. It truly can be. Every little creak or rustle around outside made my heart rate spike, and made it even harder for me to sleep. But somehow I finally calmed myself down and managed to go to sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, or I should say very early morning, I was woken up by a sound coming from outside the cabin. I could hear this slow, loud thud or thump from outside. It sounded like something very heavy had just hit the ground. I wondered if maybe a tree had fallen, but the more I listened, the more I noticed there wasn't a breath of wind out there. Not only that, but there was no other noise. I shrugged it off and closed my eyes and rolled over. 30 seconds to a minute later, I hear a scrape, a sharp sound like someone dragging something sharp across the wood on the outside wall, right on the other side of the wall where I was laying. I was already freaking out, so I shot up completely straight sitting in the bed, and I started whispering Marcus's name, trying to wake him up. I heard him groan a couple of times, but he never woke up. So much for the buddy system, I suppose. Now this next part I'm not particularly proud of, but I was in an emergency situation and I wasn't really thinking that clearly. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find to use for a weapon. It was a big, heavy metal lamp. I picked it up and as quietly as I could, leaned to the side and peeked out the window. As soon as I pulled back the curtain, it was standing right there. It's like it knew I was going to open that window and it was waiting for me. I saw this massive, intimidating figure. It was standing right outside the window. The only animal that came to my mind that could possibly be that size would be a bear. But as soon as it started moving, I knew it was something else. What I did know, with certainty, it wasn't a bear. It was standing there on two legs facing the window, almost blocking out the window completely. Now the window wasn't very high up off the ground, but this thing was completely doubled over, leaning forward so it could see inside the cabin. Standing straight, this thing had to be close to 9 feet tall. There's no way that it was much less than that. This thing was absolutely massive. It was so big that it honestly didn't look real. It looked fake. The width of the shoulders would have put any bodybuilder on this planet to shame. It had the head of a dog, but the size of it was very exaggerated, like cartoonishly big. It had these eyes. I've never seen anything quite like them. There was no light to be reflected, but this thing's eyes was glowing in the dark. How can something's eyes be self-illuminated? They were the brightest color of, I would say, almost orange. I guess that's amber, right? Yes, sir, that is amber. I was so scared I couldn't even close the curtain. I was sitting there almost face to face with this thing. It was staring right into my eyes. I felt so weird. I was paralyzed. My ears began ringing, and I felt very dizzy all of a sudden. It let out this really heavy exhale, but it grunted at the same time. When it done that, it's like I was released from some sort of spell. I fell completely backwards off the bed. It was impossible for me to think, process, thought. I took a step to the left, and I could hear it walking. It was headed for the front side of the cabin. I could hear it dragging its claws all the way down the side of the wall very slowly as it walked. It was letting me know exactly where it was going. It was headed to the front door. I could feel the vibrations in the floorboards every time it took a step. I swear the size of this thing, it had to be over 700 pounds, if not more. I tried to yell for Marcus again, but my voice would barely come out. I couldn't even scream. I could barely speak. Before all this happened, I thought I knew what being afraid was. I had no idea there were levels of fear like this. I knew the door was bolted and locked, but I didn't know if I should move or stay still. God, I wanted to leave so bad. I just wanted to get away. But this cabin was so isolated there was nowhere for me to go. The cabin was actually the safest place to be. Not that it was very safe at all. It was better than being out there with that thing. I heard it step up onto the porch. The wood was screaming under its weight. I can't believe that it didn't actually break through the boards as it was walking. It stopped right in front of the door, and then silence filled the cabin. I was waiting for it to just splinter that door off the hinges and come in and tear us both apart. But there was nothing. There wasn't a sound. But I still knew it was standing right on the outside of that door, because I hadn't heard it move anymore. The couch that Marcus was on was between me and the front door, so I started slowly crawling on my hands and knees to try to get to him and wake him up. I got about halfway there and heard something squeaking. I already knew what it was before I looked, but I didn't want to believe it. I physically watched the door handle turn left and then right, back and forth. This thing was trying to open the door. Now there was another window on the same side as the one by my bed. It was directly to my left, and there was no curtain on that window. I still don't know how this thing made it from the door to that window so fast without making any sounds. It's almost like it teleported itself there. The doorknob squeaked, and it stopped. But in between the squeaking and it appearing in the window was maybe 2 seconds. That's physically impossible. That's why my theory on Dogman is it's not a physical creature. These things are something else. Something that we don't have the complexity to understand. I didn't know it was at the window at first. I was still staring at the door until I heard a very loud sniffing sound. I slowly turned around to see it staring straight at me again. Now that I'm out of the situation, I know that it wasn't intending to hurt or kill me. I fully believe it was testing how long I could last before I lost it completely. Its goal was to mentally break me, and it did a pretty damn good job. I made eye contact with it again. It looked directly into my eyes, and I watched it tilt its head to the side, almost like it was trying to understand why I was still sitting there, paralyzed with fear and not taking any action. Now this is the part where I lose most people when I tell them this story. But I would swear it on a stack of Bibles. This is what happened. In this slow set of noises, it sounded like it spoke to me. Not with words, it's hard to describe, it was with meaning. It was as if the growl itself was a question. I heard the word, leave. And I swear to God I felt that message in my bones, but I couldn't leave. Just as quickly as it had arrived at the window, the Dogman turned and just slowly walked towards the woods until it finally walked into the dark, where I couldn't see it anymore. I didn't even hear it make a sound as it was leaving, but it was in fact gone. These things can control whether you hear their footsteps or not. You only hear them if they want you to. That's a scary thought. But I witnessed it firsthand. I just sit there on the floor, maybe for a minute, maybe hours, I don't even know. I was completely out of my mind. But eventually I saw the sun start to shine through the windows. and I found enough courage to finally move, and I woke Marcus up. We didn't even talk about what happened, really. When he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. I told him some of what had happened, and he cut me off. And with a focused and serious look of understanding on his face, after I finished, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry. I thought it was gone." I almost hit the floor again. He knew about this thing and still brought me out there. He told me that his family had dealt with this thing more than once, but it hadn't been seen out here in over 7 years. Everyone assumed it had moved on or something had happened to it. He explained to me what had happened to a few of his other family members. I won't add any of that here because it would take way too long, and most of all, those are not my stories to tell. He said he had never personally seen the thing himself, but he had found a lot of evidence of its presence. Tracks, claw marks, dead animals would be left on the porch. So without many questions, we just packed up our stuff and we got out of there. I didn't talk to Marcus much after that. We somewhat drifted apart. I mean, we're still friends, but not nearly as close as we were before that trip. Now, if I ever try to bring it up to him, he just ignores it and refuses to talk about it. It clearly doesn't want anyone out there. I felt that message. Leave. It wasn't there to hurt anyone, it just wants people to leave and stay out of that area. Maybe that's its territory. That thing was highly intelligent. I could see it in its movements and then in its eyes. It knows me now, and I don't think it'll ever forget my face. I know I won't forget its. I have since never had any desire to step foot in any sort of wooded area. It wasn't my thing before, but now I avoid it like the plague. I just couldn't get over the fact that he knew something like that was out there and took me there anyway. I almost decided to never speak to him again, but I can't fully blame him. I ignored it all, those feelings, all of my instincts, and my very soul was speaking to me the entire time, telling me I needed to leave, and I ignored it. I have to take some accountability for that myself. But it did put a permanent stain on our friendship. You know, he withheld things from me, so I think I will disclose at least the state that this happened in. That's the least I can do. At least if you live in the state, you'll know that these things are out there, and you can be on the lookout and protect yourself however you see fit. This happened in Georgia. Northern Georgia, to be exact. So if you live anywhere around that area, just know that there are dogmen in your woods. Thank you for your time. Nathan.
Hello, Real Adventures. Just call me Mike. I used to be what you would call a people pleaser. Just go along with things to avoid any disagreements. Let's just say I avoided rocking the boat. But I've since changed after this encounter. Now I would never agree these days to something like this. Never again. I'm the guy who's always trying to go along with whatever sounds fun. But hiking in the Ouachita Mountains in the dead of winter, not my brightest idea. It was my friend Dave who suggested we go and camp overnight in the backwoods. I really should have said no, but I didn't because I wanted to seem tough, because I wanted to impress my buddy who's got this whole outdoorsman machismo vibe going on. That was my first mistake. It started out pretty cool. It's a beautiful place and the weather wasn't terrible. It was chilly, but it was definitely manageable. We found a small creek pretty deep into the woods, and that's where we set up our camp. It's always nice to be close to water. This spot was way off, far away from any of the high-trafficked hiking routes, and I'm definitely not a fan of the whole off-the-beaten-path thing, but I just went along with it. Dave brought this huge tent, a couple of lanterns, and we just sat around while the fire burned talking about the nonsense that guys talk about when they're pretending to know what they're doing in the woods. Everything felt normal until it didn't. I don't know how to explain it, but as the night went on, the air started to feel thick, sort of heavy, like something was coming, like we weren't alone there. But Big Bad Dave, of course, was blissfully unaware of this feeling. He was too busy messing around with his phone, probably texting someone he didn't even care about. I kept staring into the fire, and I was hearing all these noises. I was hearing this rhythmic thump. It was like something big was taking huge steps through the woods. Whatever it was, I knew it had to be big to make thumps that loud with its feet. I tried my best to ignore it as he was, so I wasn't really worried about it. I was just following him because he supposedly knew all about this wilderness survival bushcraft type stuff. Instead of a normal animal that would run away from people in a fire, this thing just kept coming in our direction. I finally yelled at Dave and asked him if he did not hear that. And this man looked me directly in my face and said, "It's probably just a damn bear. Relax, man, it's not going to come over here." Are you kidding? It's probably just a bear? There is no sentence that should ever be spoken that says it's probably just a bear. Relax. Bears kill people. Bears are apex predators. I finally got scared and irritated at the same time, and I told him to shut up and listen. This sounds a lot bigger than a bear. It sounds like a friggin' dinosaur coming through the woods. He raised an eyebrow at me, but then he fell silent. That's when the noises came again, very loud and clear. I would almost swear that I felt the ground shake beneath us. Then we began to hear something scratching or clawing very hard against the trees. I promise you I'm no expert. I don't know a lot, but I know enough to tell when something's wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and started darting it all around frantically over the tree line, trying to see if I could get a glimpse of whatever it was making that noise. It didn't take me long to figure it out. Just for a brief second, I saw it. There was a shape, and it was darker than the shadows themselves. It was moving between the trees. It was something tall. It was something huge and wide. It was covered in hair, and it had glowing eyes. I guess Dave saw me freeze with my expression, and he followed my gaze. I heard him say in an almost hushed tone, "What in God's name is that?" I didn't even try to answer. I had no idea what I was looking at. I didn't know what we could do, but out of desperation, I just said, "Get inside the tent." Dave looked at me like I was crazy, very confused, but I didn't give him a choice. I shoved him toward the tent, and we both scrambled inside. I couldn't help glancing out the mesh window at the clearing where this Dogman was. I've come to believe that's just what it was. It was circling our camp like a fox that had just found a way into the hen house. You could hear this thing breathing from 40 yards away. It sounded like it was growling at the same time it was breathing. Dave pulled out a knife. I felt ridiculous for him. A pocket knife against something like that? Yeah, right. You'd be better off with a rock or a stick. That knife is not even going to penetrate this thing's fur. This is when the real terror hit. The Dogman was making these passes through our camp, past the tent. It would turn its body facing us. It would hunch forward in an almost linebacker position and lunge
and it moved so fast it would charge directly towards our tent and slam one of its hands into the side as it passed. It did this at least 4, maybe 5 times. Every time it came running at us, I was just waiting for the whole tent to collapse. The last time it did it, it ran off into the dark and we couldn't see it anymore. But we could hear it 'cause it started this growling. But it was fluctuating, louder, softer, louder, softer. It's a sound that would be hard to describe, but it was fluctuating up and down. And as the seconds went by, it just kept getting louder and sounded angrier until it finally sounded like a freight train roaring through the woods. All we could do was huddle up and pray that it wouldn't get any closer or come back again. But we both knew, it was just waiting for us to make a move, so it could chase us down like dogs. Once this fluctuating growl reached the point, it was so loud that I almost covered my ears. Then the thing let out this roar. It was so loud that I felt it vibrate every bone in my body. I swear the trees were shaking with the force of this roar. I don't know if it was warning us or if it was just getting ready to charge again, but it didn't really matter at the time. Either way, I felt like we were probably screwed. We just stayed silent. I held my breath for a solid minute until I thought I was going to pass out. To tell the truth, I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I did almost black out. There was no escape from this situation. There was no plan to be made. That thing had us trapped, and not only did we know it, it knew it as well. I didn't know what to do. My legs were shaking, my heart was beating so loud I was sure the creature itself probably could hear it. Then I started hearing this humming sound, like a metallic humming sound. That's when the growling stopped, the footsteps stopped, everything stopped, and the Dogman was gone. I've heard people explain this metallic humming as possibly a portal opening or closing. I would second that idea. I think that's exactly what happened here. I think this thing disappeared into a portal. I don't know when exactly it left. I don't know why it left, and I don't know where it went, but I really don't care. And as soon as we realized it was gone, I told Dave I was leaving. I didn't care if it was dark. I had a flashlight, and I was getting out of there. I packed my stuff, and I said, I'll help you get yours, but if you don't pack up, I'm leaving your ass here. So I grabbed my stuff, he packed his stuff, and we headed out. No more beers, no more camping, no more bullshit. Just get the hell out. So was this a portal? I'd like to have as many opinions as possible. Maybe it would put my mind at ease. This thing has destroyed me. I didn't like the outdoors that much, but it never bothered me. Now I'm terrified of the woods. I was never scared before. I just never really went out there much. Now if I look out my window and see a shadow in the trees, I feel like that thing is out there staring at me, like it's tracked me down. I feel like I'm about to relive all that over again. It has really messed me up. The only good thing to come out of this, now I'm not a people pleaser. I'm no longer a yes man. The Dogman gave me my backbone. Wow, that's a sentence you don't really expect to type. But it's the truth, and that's what we're all here for, right? Well, that's what happened to me and Dave, and I would like to know what everyone else thinks. Was this in fact a portal? Of course, we can't know for certain, but if I have some people telling me that they think it was as well, then I won't feel like a lunatic anymore. I guess I'll check the comment section if this story gets narrated and see what the people have to say. I was going to tell this story on a different channel about a year ago, but I got cold feet and felt somewhat uncomfortable at the last minute, and I backed out. I found this channel about 3 months ago, and I feel like this is the place to tell my story. So, let's do this. If you want to upload this, go for it. Feel free to use anything that I've put in this email. Just don't add anything extra. If I typed it out, then it's good to go. But I know you'll do well. You always do a good job. Well, Reels, I guess I'll see you on the other side, buddy. Thanks a ton. Mike. Thank you all for listening. Good night.